Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is Friday, January 30th, I believe, yep. So by the time Monday wraps around, we'll be into February. It is now, for me, on the tail end as we scroll down the SteamDB 24-hour peak concurrent charts here. The tail end of a week of being snowed in. There have been several days where it's just the ice doesn't melt outside the first few steps out of my door, and yeah, so I'm not gonna get anything done until Monday. In part, that is also because my battery backups broke, and I just don't really want to start playing any kind of games or doing anything on my computer when I don't have a battery backup, which proved to be true. A wise move, I would say, because there was, for maybe an hour there, a power outage later, like on Thursday, I think, yesterday, or maybe Wednesday. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel doing its 4-year anniversary update, which I think has caught a few people's attention more than usual, but maybe not that many more people. Still below like Binding of Isaac Rebirth, which as far as I know doesn't have any new content in it and hasn't for a very long time. So yeah, that's left me in this weird situation where I am spending a lot of time either watching streaming stuff, which I've started to watch, like hoarder house flipper shows, and this show that people buy what they claim are hoarders' houses and then house flips them, although the first 3 episodes don't seem to really do much about the fact them being hoarding houses. It seems to me more than likely they buy these houses cheap and then they just hire a third-party service to clean out the house. And if anything, the difference between buying a hoarding house where somebody is actually hoarding and there's just trash and then garbage on the floor versus buying a house that would be more of a estate house where somebody died in it, but things are nice and cleaned up, but for some reason they have no friends or family that cleaned out the house. You're better off, in my opinion, with a hoarding house, because it's very easy to tell a clean out crew to just say take everything, throw it all away. It's a lot harder when they, particularly if you know the person that had the house, when you're looking for like their personal records, things that might be involved in probate, wills, medical things of emotional value, family photos, things like that. If you have any connection to the person that owned the house, that is going to just drastically slow you down, particularly in a nicely cleaned house or a hoarding house. Even if those kinds of records do exist, you're going to just assume that they're under a layer of garbage and not bother with it. And frankly, I think most people don't bother with it anyways, and perhaps that is the best way to deal with a lot of these houses that probably are getting on the market because somebody died or was institutionalized one way or the other, put in a nursing home, put in a prison, or even as a possibility. But yeah, because I've been snowed in, I've been cleaning and decluttering my house with small bits of progress, but it's too much physical labor too close together, and I can definitely feel right now that I'm starting to crash and feel exhausted and sick, which happens when I start to do anything too physical, and I'm really not accomplishing too much in particular. That cough there excuse me, tends to come up more and more as I'm doing more and more things. And yeah, if I'm like sitting down on the floor to reach something low or bending over, that tends to be pretty awful for me too. Which, yeah, I put a smart door handle on one of my internal doors of my house, and as I put the door handle on there, I looked at it and saw that the keypad plastic on it was broken. So then I immediately had to take the whole thing off, and I ordered a different brand of what is almost certainly the exact same technology with just slightly different molding and plastics to it. But yeah, I'm still experimenting with getting my Tuya smart house to be more smart, at the danger of having too many Wi-Fi devices. I got a couple of Zigbee plugs to replace some Wi-Fi plugs, so now I may have a couple of extra Wi-Fi plugs I may not use. And I'm testing out a fan booster register fan booster, I guess is the right way to say it, in one of my rooms, and I have it like at its highest fan setting, which is too loud, like so loud in fact I can hear it making noise through the AC ducts of that room into my room even now. So yeah, but it is set to slope up and down in speed on the fans based on A, if the air conditioner is actually blowing in the first place, and B, what temperature you set it at to reach as far as a range. And the general idea here is to better balance the air in individual rooms and have perhaps a better balance of temperatures, although perhaps not exactly the same temperatures if one person likes their room a little colder or a little hotter by a degree or two. I think these boost registers might work fairly well. Plus they are a thermostat that would give you some kind of reading per room. But unfortunately, I don't think there's anything that directly integrates them into any kind of smart thermostat. So the way it's been done before, and I've been doing it, is by using an Ecobee thermostat and remote sensors. And those sensors are giving me different temperatures than what the fan register is telling me, although the fan register's thermostat is also on the roof. So its temperature is probably somewhat different from something in the middle of the room. So yeah, the other thing, other than being forced to do more physical labor than I'd really like to, is I've been over shopping almost certainly. And yeah, really didn't even make it to the end of January before I'm kind of running up the bill again. I'm trying to be mostly practical about what I'm getting, but there are definitely some improvements. Basically, the situation is there's probably about 10 years worth of projects that I didn't start most of, or occasionally like one project here and one project there. And even like the smart locks on the door handles, that's a technology that really could be improved. It would be better if they were Zigbee instead of Wi-Fi, for instance, or Matter. And Matter has been really a major thorn in the side as far as adopting technology. It would be better if they had ultra-wideband abilities, but there's literally only one lock that has that, and they've been talking about that for 4 or 5 years, and I'm not even sure we aren't going to just find out that a Kara U400 that does have ultra-wideband may very well still not work, because this wouldn't be the first time that they've claimed to have auto unlock smart locks where you walk up to the door and it just automatically unlocks, and it just doesn't work because of the software and the programming aspect. In fact, most smart devices have fallen apart because these are Chinese hardware manufacturers throwing in chips but not really putting any effort into actually programming the chips to work correctly to any kind of standard. I don't know why we're getting an ad here. Let's reload this page and see if that ad is still here. This is Moby Games, and the idea that Moby Games would have an ad pop up just really, I guess, is another great example of the level of garbage that websites look like. Yeah, looks to me like something went wrong with my ad blocking ad guard home setup, and it needs to be reset, but I can't do that while I'm in the middle of streaming. Good news is we won't see too many pages with ads on them, although it may be all the news pages. Yeah, you can just see how awful this whole experience is as far as having these pop-ups show up over the content you really want to see. I've been playing a lot of the upgraded Pokemon TCG Pocket. They have added stadiums, as in something similar to Plains and Magic the Gathering. So it's kind of interesting that Pokemon TCG Pocket, a game that was designed to make Pokemon faster, would feel the need to add new gimmicks and expand to be closer to Pokemon TCG original. But you know, it seems like that's the case. They've also added some random battles so you can get a few more rewards for playing solo in a new expansion. Which it does feel like this new expansion does have cards from just like the latest Pokemon game. So I am still having to assume that Pokemon TCG Pocket expansions either skipped over a ton of expansions that happened in the original Pokemon TCG in the real world, or they are creating their completely different expansions. But yeah, I don't know if there's really too much I would want to say other than that, because it is still just a Pokemon card game that mostly just plays itself. Still playing Memento Mori, making small bits of progress. They have a new character, and in a couple days they're going to cycle over to some newer old characters to catch up on. They've got they've cycled in the Guild Tree events, which they do that once every couple of months. So that they'll try one event, and then they'll try another event, and then they'll cycle in another event, and it's just not too many. Young Conquer. I've never heard of that one. Yeah. And let's see. Have I been doing much of anything else? No. Kind of know that I want to probably just jump into like Resident Evil 0 or Resident Evil 2 after this. Since I have been given the opportunity to take a fairly decent break there between playing Resident Evil 1 and Save Room because of the snowstorm. I want to continue to make progress cleaning and decluttering, but I really need to pace myself better now that the snowstorm is gone. Once I get the battery back up, I need to pace myself better, because I'm gonna just get myself sick enough that I'm just not doing anything for months and months, potentially, which that doesn't help anything. And yeah, I am still kind of at a loss trying to find a handyman that could help coordinate some repairs and things I need done to my house, or do them if they are actually qualified to do them. I have several little projects that I'd like to wrap up or do myself, but it's going to really come down to, can I line the floor and take a faucet off, things like that. Because yeah, if I can line the floor and take a faucet off and replace it myself, that'll be considerably cheaper than paying even a handyman. Well, unfortunately, the problem with handyman is they can be extremely flighty and they can be extremely expensive, and frankly, they can just be extremely pains in the butt, because a lot of them don't do things right, a lot of them don't follow instructions, a lot of them are in a rush to get to the next job, to get the next check. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Is there anything else that's coming directly to mind? Steam has banned yet another game. It seemed to have been kind of a rhythm game slash visual novel, probably most visual novel, where you are an Uber driver and you were chatting up and probably romancing slash sleeping with the riders. And I get this information from Sex Positive Gaming's YouTube channel, and I don't know what was exactly in it that was a problem, but something was. So yeah, another censored game or banned game. The bigger story, though, for censorship by far is that the Switch version of the game Dispatch, which is much more of a mainstream game, is even more censored than the already slightly censored version, because there was content that they chose to cut out when developing it of the PC version. So yeah, it's just getting worse and worse as far as an artistic intent, or the ability for adults to enjoy adult content if they want to. Otherwise, as far as video game news comes, there was that whole State of Azeroth event. I think that happened, and I didn't watch any of it. So hopefully we'll get some news from my news sources as to what they said, what Blizzard said about that, and pretty much all of their Blizzard games that it seemed they were going to tease and talk about. Yeah, and again, I just don't feel particularly great, and yeah, I hate that I just keep going in circles whining about that, but this part of this channel, particularly live streams, is about being honest, and the honesty here is, yeah, I would prefer at the moment to be sleeping and hopefully getting better. A big part of why I'm probably coughing on top of just overexerting myself is because the humidity is incredibly low in my house, because I've been running the heater fairly high. And there is definitely an argument to turning it back down. Although I've been running my heater at like 80 degrees, so it's a big thermal battery, and I talked to someone else who is nearby where I live, and they were running their heater at 68 degrees. And I'm like, that's insane. Like, I could see 72, 74, 76, but I mean, you're lowering the human temperature way too much there. And I guess the thing there is that they're just wrapping up in blankets and things that generally I prefer not to do. We'll get a new hardware survey pretty quickly here. Yeah, haven't played anything, didn't do anything with Slopeside Kings, so there's really nothing to say here. Haven't played anything on my Steam Deck either, which I guess I could have done that. The big story, I think, is the game that is just getting very negatively reviewed, which it is a rare occurrence, certainly, when you have a new game come out and then the reviews are just very negative. What's this? Amplitude Studios? I don't recognize them. But yeah, we might be working our way towards a point where every kind of weeks or so, every couple of weeks, we may have a new game that comes out and that gets talked about, but doesn't inherently mean that it will be received well. There was supposed to be something big, but I think it got cancelled, and I can't even remember what the game was. So it might very well just be like Code Vein 2, which will be totally underreported on. Maybe Karen will get talked about. Really lost most of my mainstream video game journalists review sites that talk about games in general, in part because I didn't really trust their opinions, as they seem to very often just be leading me towards games that most gamers were not talking about or playing. And really, I think at this point the realization has to be made that most gamers are just not playing any games, or that there is no such thing as most gamers is perhaps the best way to describe it, in that there really are just gamers that focus on their one game, and whatever they're talking about or whatever they're playing tends to be the only game they play forever. Perhaps that is in part why the gamer meetups kind of fall flat in some ways, is because you do have these random people who consider themselves gamers show up, and then they are just not playing or even interested in the same games that other people are interested in. But also, I think maybe there's definitely room for more game discussion, and that's where doing a gaming meetup in general probably needs a strong community of people willing to just communicate throughout the rest of the month as far as, here's what I'm playing, here's my favorite types of games. Let's make smaller groups of people who have similar interests, something more specific than just games in general. Yeah, pretty obviously I haven't also worked on any of the HTML, although I didn't. This seems new. The image is looking like that. So is this an early access? I really do need to figure out how to make a cough button. But yeah, this one is early access, so I'll leave it on the follow list. This one is Steam Deck verified and out of early access. I don't know if there's really a reason why, but I've been reminded of the whole Blackwell point and click games. It is perhaps the one series that I've covered that is most antithetical to what I want as far as a point and click game. And listening to the commentary of the creator throughout those 5 games, basically drone on and sing his own praises and sing his love for his creation, which is nice that he loves his own creation, but it really just speaks to a lack of self-criticism in most cases. I found pretty irritating. Humankind is mixed reviewed. So yeah, I would almost have to suggest that anybody who's ever thinking about creating anything, whether it's developing a game or otherwise, should probably play the Blackwell games, or if I can self-plug, watch my run-throughs of the entire Blackwell games as a playlist on my channel for all of them, and just listen to the commentary runs in particular, because it really feels like a great example of somebody who kind of fell in love with what they were doing and locked themselves off far too much from any criticism or comparing or even verifying and like touching grass and making sure they were similar to other kinds of point and clicks that were coming out during the time. And in particular, I think the point and clicks he was making for the Blackwell games were probably on a non-Steam website, where it was a lot of other rather small point and click adventure games using a special engine that probably made game development way easier than it might be if you were using something like Unreal Engine, Unity, or Godot engine, which in 2026, all of those engines can be rather easy with plugins and libraries, particularly if you're making something simple like a point and click. But we've seen it very often with RPG Maker games. You just have people make RPG games like crazy to flood the market, and there's gotta be, I would have to assume, at least 30% of the developers that make those RPG Maker garbage games are just completely deluded, and they just don't really know what the state of the industry as far as video games in general are, what the audience really wants. And sure, maybe some of them are selling 1,000 copies or so, and that's good enough for them, but my fear, much like using AI and vibe coding, is that there's just going to be this continuous de-evolution of what people think a game programmer is, or what people think what it takes to be a game programmer. And I ran into this scenario in the past in my life as far as just programming and IT in general. There's a lot of people who are basically just doing customer service stuff and really don't know anything about IT, and yet they're getting hired in IT, and they're devaluing what IT is, and then it feeds upon itself, and the IT department becomes full of just really a bunch of customer service reps who are reading through a script and really don't know anything about IT. So yeah, don't go the way of the Blackwell games. That first Blackwell game would have been fine, but then there would have been a much better sequel in that 5-game series if they had just taken a few years, if they put a lot more polish into it, a lot more effort into it. Blackwell point-and-click games really are very linear in their story. They almost have no puzzles in them at all. There's just major problems with them. The story is okay, but it definitely could have used some improvement if there was more of a critical eye on it. And that's why, as a video game critic, I think critics are kind of necessary too, is that while in general my criticism is consumer advice to people, to end users who want to buy a game, there is an advantage, if you're open to listen, for game developers to bring in critics and look at their game while they're in development and say, hey, this concept is not going to sell, or this is going to be a problem. And yeah, that probably doesn't happen that often because we see far too many games launching with problems. Here we can see there are no Steam Deck refurbs available. I don't expect that there are going to be any more. Some of the YouTubers that I've been following as far as talking about the Steam Deck feel like they are starting to run out of things to say about the Steam Deck. There's just not really going to be a big announcement of anything until the Steam machines come out, and probably months later after the Steam machines get announced. Wouldn't be surprised if almost all of 2026 is that they announced that the Steam machines are available for pre-order in like the first quarter of 2026, and then deliveries don't show up until the end of 2026. Watched the latest episode of Fallout New Vegas. There's really not a lot to say about those episodes per episode. It's barely showing us anything per episode. It's really trying to tell more of a linear story than it probably should. And I am mostly just bored whenever it jumps away from the ghoul character. Which, yeah, I don't know if that's 100% the actor's fault. I think it may just be the writing. I think it may also just be the case that the Fallout games in particular are not really designed to be anything like a TV show that has an A plot, a B plot, and a C plot. Whereas it perhaps would have been an interesting experiment if we did just stay with the Vault Hunter girl, and then any side stories that were going to be told would have had to have been told through communication and dialogue. So any backstory that that the main character would have seen would have had to have been told to Lucy directly. And then you could do a flashback, but going back to the main vault really doesn't feel like it's that interesting. Am I watching anything else particularly interesting in streaming? No, just really trying to kill a lot of time. It does feel so weird. It seems like just wearing my glasses for a couple hours has changed how my eyes work just overnight, and I don't know if it fixed it or I don't think it really fixed it, but it's just everything is different now, and it's crazy that it works that effectively. Yeah, I guess there's nothing else to really say, so let's just jump into the video game news. I already know I'm going to be exhausted, and I don't want this to be a 5-hour stream. I barely want this to be a 2-hour stream. If only I could use text to speech or in something like this, and yeah. Yeah. Problem is, anything I hand off from these news live streams just means I personally won't absorb the information, and the whole point of doing the news live streams in part is so I personally absorb the information and know it. Let's see. A director assures Ubisoft remains committed to Beyond Good and Evil 2 despite recent upheaval. Quote, we remain committed and focused on delivering a remarkable game for our players. I believe this director is probably at the central point of why Beyond Good and Evil 2 has not come out yet. It's Fozzie Mesmar. But I mean, it's almost impossible to care about Beyond Good and Evil 2 in that it looks nothing like Beyond Good and Evil 1. It's a prequel. It's been in development since 2008, and then a re-reveal in 2017. Yeah, it very possibly has never left the pre-production stage. Anyways, I did see an interesting YouTube video talking about how cutting cost is not a business strategy, and the general sentiment, I guess, does make some sense, is that if you're in charge of a company and your only plan is to cut costs, which when they say cut costs they mean laying off people, then you're not planning in any way to actually grow the business or grow the business sales. You're just turtling until maybe you can convince somebody else to buy your company, perhaps for a lot less than its current shareholder value. Which, yeah, I think in particular in Ubisoft's case, they are just trying to shutter the company and tank the stock value so they can go private. At which point they might pull full 180 and announce a whole bunch of new games once they're private and start developing again after laying off a bunch of people. This also perhaps is an example of where maybe after a certain age you should be forced into retirement from being a CEO, and that maybe there should just be some ageism there where if somebody is going to be in charge of something, they shouldn't be in their 70s or 80s or even 60s where they are on the verge of retiring themselves, so they don't really know that they're going to be around by the time projects actually could be finished. Let's see, a Nintendo Direct is reportedly coming next week, dedicated to the partner games. Okay. It would be interesting if we saw more Nintendo games actually get announced. It's still very slim pickings, and I've been seeing some slick deals for, like, even Donkey Kong Bonanza is on sale, so it's like that is probably the biggest, newest game for the Switch 2, and the fact that it's on sale is kind of crazy when there's nothing bigger and newer. Let's see, Google rolls out a prototype of Project Genie, an AI tool which generates playable worlds. Users have already started posting examples, often using copyrighted characters. This looks like yet another wasteful generative AI thing. Yeah. Oh yeah. One of the things I'd like to spend very little money on, as far as talking about shopping, is I'd love to get a 9-seat sectional sofa. But first I'd have to get rid of a sofa, which is custom made and ugly and too big and too hard to move. And that is part of what I'm also trying to do, is not have ridiculously heavy pieces of equipment or furniture, but if you tend to have vintage antique furniture or just solid wood furniture, it does tend to be really, really heavy. But yeah, I do have enough room that if I got rid of the sofa, and this is really a long-term project, that would have to be really on sale too. Where a 3x3 grid to make a giant bed, if needed be, versus taking maybe 4 of the seat sections and moving them around the house would work fairly nicely. In that you would have something that would be like a day bed, although it probably wouldn't sleep too well, probably wouldn't be too high quality. Generally, I think these sectional sofas with storage have probably more framework, where others will just be pure foam. But yeah, that's something I will keep an eye out for, but again, it would have to be, basically have to get it used or something if I was going to go with that. And I imagine it's literally 2 or 3 companies that make all of them, and they're all designed closer to IKEA quality than custom good quality. Speaking of custom, I also have a project idea in which I have one really long room that's a formal dining room that has 2 doors, and theoretically, as far as like, again, a very low priority project, it might be interesting to put a fake wall and separate that room out. I could put my server racks in what would become a new hallway pantry area and give me more room for storing foodstuffs. It would just really be a bunch of frames, 2x6s, to hold the width of cans and a wall, and then I was going to put some like movie theater fabric on one side and leave it raw wood on the other, and put carpet all around the edges so it doesn't actually maim the walls too much. Maybe bolt it into the wall in a couple places, but ideally it would be just completely freestanding, which would really require it to be more of a box than just a wall. In part, could be more C-shaped. But yeah, that again is not the kind of project I want to do anytime soon, because that is more of a silly idea project versus a, hey, this helps me get to my goals type project. You have to be very careful about projects and remodels and things like that, depending on your house, and that may not add value to your house, and it may be that your house is just too old or too much of a mess anyways for it to be beneficial. Yeah, and the main goal really is just to have my server rack be as quiet as possible, which I could probably just pull that off by hanging carpet, cheap carpet around it as soundproofing. Moving on, I'm kind of rambling here, and I think that's going to happen a lot today. Again, I don't think I'm at my top of my game. That's why normally my schedule is the way it is that I'll really relax for most of the time between live streams and just play a little bit of video games and do a little bit of other things, because I really do need to just kind of mentally and physically recover. Let's see, Yakuza Kiwami Studio says the full game won't have graphical issues that are being reported in the demo. The day 1 patch will address lighting issues and other quality concerns, it says. Twice as many developers surveyed by GDC say they want to make games on PS5 or Switch 2 than on Xbox. PC remains the most popular systems among developers so far. It's funny how Video Games Chronicles still always uses this one screenshot whenever they're talking about Xbox in part. Look at this numbers though. I mean, this really goes to show, even though the number of people actually owning a Steam Deck and playing on a Steam Deck may be much lower, enthusiasm is incredibly high on having something that can run on PC at a particularly low spec, also that it could run on a Steam Deck, beating out the Nintendo Switch 2 by a percentage point. But yeah, Steam Deck very well could be the silent underdog. It just kind of comes out of nowhere and shocks Nintendo and PlayStation as far as people rejecting a overly expensive piece of hardware that doesn't have that many games, or a overly expensive piece of hardware that doesn't have that many games. Still some small interest in Android and iOS, but I definitely wouldn't be suggesting anybody make anything from that. And then a weird category of tabletop games, and then it seems like people just want real world versions of their video games, which I don't think that ever works particularly well. And then Linux is at 12%, tied with Mac, which, yeah, Linux and Mac generically much lower than Steam Deck. HTML web browsers at 10%, and yeah, very few people I imagine are actually making games for HTML. And then you've got some really low numbers for the rest of this chart. Virtua Fighter 5 Revo Switch 2 release date marks the first Nintendo release in the series' 33-year history. Might as well mention that I've gotten the filament and the filament dryer for the 3D printer I've gotten, so I'm probably already $60-70 into something I got for free. But I'm not really any closer because I need to clean off a piece of table, which means I need to clean off the floor path to that table. Then I need to clean off the 3D printer and probably re-grease it and adjust tension belts and just reset everything and hope everything just works before I go any further with it. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work, and then I've got filament and a 3D dryer, which I guess I could maybe send back, which I probably would. Like, I don't really feel a great need to take the plunge and buy a whole new 3D printer if the one I got didn't work, as it is just yet another thing that I don't have that much time in my life for. But I do plan on making bits of progress there because it is in the floor and in the way at the moment. Anyways, Nintendo reveals more Tomodachi Life Living the Dream info, including its release date. Game will be coming to the Switch in April. Tomodachi Life Living the Dream will include same-sex relationships and non-binary characters, fulfilling Nintendo's promise. Apparently, a same-sex quote bug in the 3DS processor caused backlash when it was patched out. Yep. There are people that get irritated when quote woke stuff gets shoved in the face of people, and there are definitely people who are not being intellectually honest when you see an option like this and say it's being shoved in your face when it's really just being offered as an option. That being said, Nintendo games in the past have been localized and forced in certain ways that they fully remove the ability for someone to claim to be male or female. And it is just body type 1 and body type 2. And that tends to really irritate people because you're removing terms instead of adding options. Frankly, from a programming side, it's probably just easier in particular. I feel like there have been some games in the past where you would choose to be male and then the dating preferences were always female, or you choose to be female and all the dating preferences were all male. And so yeah, in the past it feels like they've overprogrammed things that otherwise would be pretty easy. And weirdly, I feel like most of the porn games figured it out pretty easily, in that you really just check a few boxes at the beginning and all of the characters you can date are dateable because they're just all bi or pansexual. Let's see, moving on, more than a quarter of devs surveyed by GDC were laid off in the past 2 years, and half of them don't have a new job. Execs are throwing people overboard and expecting these scuttled ghost ships to keep making them infinite money. Yeah, the state of the game industry is pretty bad. And yeah, we haven't seen as much as we would have liked to see as far as new people being able to form new companies and hire any of these people who are laid off, or that these people that are laid off have been able to go indie and develop their own games. But yeah, that's hard, certainly. We might see, if it's over the past 2 years, maybe in the next 4 to 6 years, we'll see a bunch of indie games from people who were laid off. But I imagine a lot of these people who are laid off are going to just move to different industries or struggle in some other way. But I could see them completely leaving the game industry. There's always been a problem with the game industry treating its game developers, their most important asset, as disposable. And that has certainly not been improved. There is a slight thought that maybe the AI bubble will burst and it will just ruin all management of these companies, and all of a sudden you'll just see CEOs getting fired and laid off because they invested so heavily in AI. And then the new CEOs come in and then they have to desperately try and hire people, but they're going to hire younger, cheaper labor anyways. They're not going to hire back established talent. So the brain drain is more than likely just there. So yeah, it's perhaps a good time for everyone who's laid off to learn Godot and try and go indie and use a open source free license in the process. Here's the story I talked about before. Dispatch is censored on Nintendo Switch and Switch 2, and this might be the reason why. Nudity and other mature content is reportedly being censored on the Nintendo versions. Well, one would assume that the reason why is because Nintendo told them it had to be censored. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if it really is, in part, the developers also being too eager to censor themselves when asked, and maybe it is the case of even the publisher having a whole element involved in it too. It's interesting they're talking about hentai here when I really wouldn't call this hentai. I would not think that all animated adult porn is gonna fall under the category of hentai. Speaking of hentai, I think I saw a story that in like Minnesota, some 26-year-old has been arrested and being prosecuted for having hentai, and so I don't know if there's some state law there under which that is applied. Usually in these cases there's real pictures of real children being abused, and then there's also some hentai in it mixed in. But yeah, in the past it's been more leaning towards the free speech element of the US Constitution, where animated stuff from the pure imagination of a creator was considered free speech. Free speech has to protect disgusting speech, is a phrase that was once said. Otherwise it doesn't really protect anything. But who knows, there could be all kinds of new state laws that haven't been challenged yet. But yeah, that could definitely affect video games in particular, and they're going to look at that more and more with the idea of AI. Although in the case of what like Grok was doing, Grok was starting with pictures of actual real children and then non-consensually editing them to make them look explicit, which I don't believe that is protected in the United States, or particularly in too many places around the world, if anywhere. But yeah, it has very little to do with this censorship, but it does show that censorship is still popping up. As soon as you stop talking about it, they pull another bout of censorship and hope nobody notices. They just try to push the line a little bit more and a little bit more. Let's see, 10 years after Mighty Number 9, Keiji Inafune studio concept has officially dissolved. This was the former Mega Man producer. Studio was behind the much criticized Kickstarter campaign. I don't remember this story. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually is either close or has been secretly hired back by Capcom to make a new Mega Man game instead. Yeah, apparently Mighty Number 9 wasn't good enough. Then they were criticized for deciding to fund another project, Red Ash the Indelible Legend, through Kickstarter. This last project was in 2016 with Xbox exclusive Recore, which wasn't a particularly good game. And then in 2022 he launched a range of NFTs on the Japanese marketplace. So that feels like he's fallen pretty far. What's funny here is that this almost is certainly a story that shows that the Mega Man style games are not that desirable and just not well designed for the modern audience's desires, because this is basically the only Mega Man style game that I've ever seen besides Mega Man games even been released. Well, you would think every now and then you would get an occasional just independent game that was something like that on Steam, but perhaps it is also just more difficult to program than you would think, because while you could use something like Godot or even RPG Maker to make the levels around a Mega Man style game, the AI programming of the characters, how they move, how they attack, how your character moves and attacks, and how his moves and attacks change when he defeats and gains the abilities of the other robots, all are more custom code that a low effort game developer is not going to put the effort into to try and accomplish. It's not going to be simple code that you can just copy and paste somewhere. Yeah. I'll leave it at that and move on. Kingdom Come Deliverance appears to be getting a PS5 upgrade after the PlayStation Store briefly mentioned it. Pokemon Ascended Heroes cards won't be tournament legal for the European Championship following fans' concerns. Special sets now won't be tournament legal until 2 weeks after their Elite Trainer box is released. Let's see if we can see some of these cards. I imagine they have ridiculous amounts of health and attack. But yeah, even in Pokemon TCG Pocket, you have mega evolutions of characters that have just like 100 extra health or 70, 80 extra damage. It is kind of weird the direction that the Pokemon card game seems to be going, and it is them trying to evolve the existing Pokemon into mega evolutions instead of creating new Pokemon, much like how Digimon kind of had its small collection of fan favorites and they just continuously got evolved more and more. Yeah, Digimon really hasn't added that many new characters that people are super excited by. Although I feel like all of these cards, whether it's TCG Pocket or in the real world Pokemon trading card game, I think like maybe 60 to 80% of all the cards are just not playable and stupid. And it probably is like most card games where there's only 4 or 5 meta decks worth playing where you can actually win. Let's see. February's PlayStation Plus Essential Monthly Games have been confirmed. Let's see, do we have a nice list here? Undisputed Subnautica Below Zero Ultros. I don't recognize that game. And Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown. And then an indie dev who turned to social media to lengthen their game's credits ended up taking 300 hours to add 60,000 names. The developer promised to add anyone who liked their tweet, expecting 100 to reply. Well, that is an interesting way to do some guerrilla marketing. It is probably also a hugely inefficient way in which he did it, since it seemed like it took 300 hours. It would seem to me it would be fairly easy to just get a list from Twitter of everybody that liked that that post. Now, certainly that doesn't really add anything to the game. If anything, it just feels like you're trying to pad out the length of your game so people don't refund it under 2 hours. And even if you could very quickly just pull a list of everybody that liked it, which seems very doable, you probably then are going to spend 20 hours at least going through that list to make sure all of the names are appropriate. Meanwhile, doing a gimmick like this tells you nothing about the game. It's not until we scroll down that we even see the name is Twilight Moonflower. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he puts a achievement where you have to sit through the entire credits also without skipping. But at a certain level, I guess it's a gimmick, and a gimmick is a gimmick. And if you've got nothing better to show off or do to promote your game, it's better. Something is better than nothing. So I mean, I really can't be too down on the idea. I feel like you could do better things, certainly. There. In particular, I just don't think that gets your game wishlisted, which is your biggest focus and desire on Steam. So, but also, I believe Steam doesn't allow you to do competitions or giveaways based on wishlisting a game. So if you said, if 1,000 people wishlist this game, I'll put more content in the game, or I'll give away 1,000 Steam keys or anything like that, that would get your game taken off of Steam. So yes, you can say, please go wishlist the game now, but that's basically all you can say. Steam doesn't want you manipulating the wish list more than that. Now, frankly, probably it would be smarter just to put out a demo of your game instead of spending 300 hours making a long credit scene as a gimmick. Moving on to the Gematsu articles. Zenless Zone Zero version 2.6 update Encore for an Old Dream launches February 6th. Did Zenless Zone Zero always look like this? I don't think it did. And here we have yet another pop-up ad. All these websites are pretty much designed from the same cookie cutter website design stores that automatically inject ads, and I'd imagine these websites are making some small pennies on these ads, and that the people showing these ads are getting almost nothing for it, showing off this. I don't look at ads on the web, but pretty much they all seem incredibly relevant, incredibly terrible, and I don't think any of it really leads to people actually clicking on things and buying things. Super Robot Wars Y DLC 2 Awakening of the Soul launches February 6th. And I need to keep momentum there. My phone decided to send me an errant notification as I'm moving plugs over to Zigbee plugs. Yeah, if I could go back and have bought only Zigbee bulbs and only Zigbee power monitoring outlets with switches, that would have been great. I don't know if they were really available 3 or 4 years ago when I first started building out my smart home. And yeah, a lot of what I have is still working fine. I've only had a couple of smart bulbs actually break. For the most part, that's just they burn themselves out. So even replacing things is just going to leave me with extra things. So I have no real reason to replace them at the moment. Did I mention? I think I did fix my network. Apparently there's a multi-user, multi-input, multi-output or something like that. It's MU-MIMO function that's a professional setting on my router, and probably something you can't easily turn on or turn off, where it tries to send the same signal to multiple devices on the Wi-Fi. And yeah, I just don't think that works with 2 devices. So disabling that all of a sudden had a lot less of devices losing their connections. That being said, though, a average router really can only handle 25 to maybe 50 Wi-Fi devices at once. And so once you hit that limit, that's when your network just starts to fall apart, and what was going great all of a sudden becomes a nightmare. Let's see, Okami 20th anniversary teaser website has been opened. Maybe we'll see a 20th anniversary Okami game. Maybe not. Under the Island launches February 17th. It's a pixel art action RPG game being dated. So, let's see if we get a bit of a trailer. Get a better idea. It looks very Zelda-like, and I'm always interested in something that looks like a Zelda game, like a Link's Awakening game. Character seems to have some kind of what looks like a hockey puck, and yeah, this I find extremely exciting, in that there really just aren't that many of these kinds of games out there. There's a lot of games that look somewhat like this, but then they really just turn into dungeon crawler RPG maker experiences, or they just aren't actively trying to make dungeons or puzzles or anything like that, and instead they're just trying to have somebody fight a bunch of random enemies. Of course, unfortunately, the only couple of these games I have played on Steam tend to be somewhat small and short. The It'll Do series is an example of that, where It'll Do 2 in particular is a fine game, but it's just not that long epic journey that you would expect from a Link's Awakening inspired experience. But yeah, I am very excited about that game, although perhaps some confusion as to why you have this Seashell Island character with a hockey stick. Yeah, look at the screenshots here and see how it goes out of its way to look something like a Zelda game, and out of its way to very much not look like an RPG Maker game. That is a big deal in my book. Otherwise I would potentially just dismiss a game like this, and even seems like I even did dismiss this game back in June 2nd of 2025, because I didn't put it on the fall list, although maybe I put it on the fall list and then took it off the fall list again. That probably also goes to show just how early you should be announcing your games. Just announce and announce and announce, and have a very long lead up to catch people's attention. A Chinese mythology action RPG, Genie Gods Neza, has been announced for PS5 and PC. Okay. Let's just look at the Steam page. Here's the thing, certainly with screenshots now, that hyper realistic, very good graphics can be very standard. So it's kind of hard to tell, in particular for something like this. Do they have a video? Even the show? I don't think there's a video here. This could be something close to a Bayonetta game, probably not. This could be really good, it could be nothing. Kind of hard to tell. It really would help to have a video in this case, see it in actual movement. Snow Brothers Classic Collection launches February 6th, 3-game collection priced at $14.99. It is very questionable, though, whether you should be paying that much for the Snow Brothers games. They aren't that relevant, and they aren't that good for that price. If they had been selling this potentially for $2.99 when it gets to that sale price, maybe I would consider it. But even then, I'd really have to question whether I think they're even that relevant. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined details beginning of the adventure. Definitely feels like this Dragon Quest VII Reimagined might be a really great place to jump in And yeah, it might be a big time sink for a lot of people too, as far as where people put their attention. A new version of the original Final Fantasy VII is coming to PC. The old version is going to be delisted but remains accessible to existing owners. And they're going to say it has improved gameplay experience, which I can only assume it means you are going to do more damage and have more of an abridged experience overall. Because I'm pretty sure Final Fantasy VII is turn-based. So yeah, this might be a good time to buy the original version if you really cared. I wouldn't be surprised if Square Enix puts out this new version and people hate it and negatively review it, which that happens more often than not when you take away something and replace it with something newer and different. And since Square Enix has been canceling so many other projects, why in the world did they let this project go all the way through? I guess it was probably close to being done. Let's see. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined Adventures Log Part 3 trailers on Gamatsu if you want to check it out. Icarus Console Edition launches February 26. Let's see. You can see it's rated very positively as a game, survival crafting game. It's not in early access on Steam. And I guess the question is it something I would ever really want to play? Probably not, but I'll put it on the wish list anyways. Hunt Down Overtime has been announced for PC. It's a retro run and gun prequel going to be a roguelite instead. I saw a review for that game, Terminator 2 No Fate, and I was shocked to hear that it took the people reviewing it 30 minutes to beat the whole game, and they treated it very much like an arcade game where you just are continuing and basically pretending like you're putting quarters into it, and that there might be a reason to play the game 2 or 3 times, but they're like charging $30 for Terminator 2 No Fate, and that is really expensive for something that incredibly short. I don't know what you do with that. Probably what you do with that is you either charge $5.99 for something like that because it's a licensed product. It can be a little bit more expensive, or you bundle it with a whole bunch of other Terminator games that were made for other consoles. If it was a collection of Terminator games, including a new game, then you could charge a higher price. But yeah, gamers not willing to be ripped off just for nostalgia around a very old movie series, which has more bad movies than it does good movies, which is kind of true for most of the movie series. Let's see, Virtual Fighter 5 Revo World Stage for Switch 2 launches March 26. You can see in the last 30 days it's been more mixed reviews. Overall, it's been mostly positive. I wonder what the problem has been recently. EAC Easy Anti-Cheat is what EAC stands for. So they snuck in DRM into it, making the game unplayable on the Steam Deck in particular, and they're not happy about that. And I hope we see more pushbacks and stories like this, and we see companies actually care about pushbacks and stories like this where they're sneaking in anti-cheat after the initial sales. Although they probably get away with that still quite a bit. Again, sorry for coughing so much. Hosey launches March 30th. Unleash your inner designer. So is this like a Canadian cozy game? Or is it combining home and cozy? But if you're doing that, why not just say homey? Put it on the fall list, but I don't know how many of these cozy games I really want to play. It's kind of a thing where it'd be hard to criticize them too much. You know? Like, if there really aren't any goals, if it is just sit back and chill, it gets kind of hard to criticize something like that. Let's see, Phasmophobia 2026 roadmap has been announced. Let's see. Seems like several things are being announced here, and if I felt more energetic, I might dive deeper into this picture. Certainly this Unity and network update catches my eye. But yeah, right now I'm going to just say no to that, and can point out that Phasmophobia is very popular as a mostly online centric horror game of some sort. Screenshots wise though, this is kind of an easy game to ignore. It's one of these spot the anomaly games, I think. Like a lot of dark screenshot syndrome, a lot of lack of explanation onto what you're actually doing in the game, visually speaking. Tomodachi Life Living a Dream launches April 16th. I'll leave it at that. Kazuma Kaniko's Tsukiyomi has been announced for Switch. Just definitely seems like some wild images. Yeah. It is a premium deck building tower dungeon game based on the free-to-play title Tsukiyomi the Divine Hunter. Interesting. So, looks like it's kind of a nicely polished but pretty simplistic dungeon crawler game based on a card game that may only be known of in Japan or Asian countries, at least. Certainly don't recognize any of this. See, it's weird if Nintendo was going to have a Partners Direct that we're getting Nintendo announced games before that. But maybe the Partner Direct came and went and I'm just behind on news. I would say these dungeon crawler games are the RPG makers of the East. Like, there is still too many companies that think that that is a genre that should come to the West at the very least. And honestly, I don't really have a lot of faith that these games even sell well in the East nowadays. They're slow, they're grindy, they lack visual animations and polish. They tend to lack any real stakes or any real story. They're just built under a core concept, usually, of wasting the player's time to a high level, and I feel like even the Japanese audience is no longer interested in doing high levels of time wastes and time sinks. I assume this is a self-insert of the creator into the game. Maybe. Maybe not. Crimson Desert features overview number 1, Cliff in the Open World of Pywell trailer is available on Gamatsu if you want to check that out. See, Crimson Desert is not out yet. It's coming in March. The DuckTales, not DuckTales, the Disney Afternoon Collection is coming to the Switch 1 and 2 on February 26th. It includes 2 additional titles exclusive to the Nintendo release, which that really sucks. But in fairness, I don't think any of these games are really worth playing, and if you are going to play them, you're probably better off just running them via an emulator. Looks like Bonkers and a Goof Troop game are being added, and so I would hope that that gets added to people who own the PC version at some point in the future, but I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't happen. Both Goof Troop and Bonkers probably slightly less well known than DuckTales, Chip 'n Dale's, Tailspin, and Darkwing Duck, which is not to really say much of anything because all of those games are fairly unknown. Bonkers, I guess, is the one in particular that has characters that went kind of nowhere. Yep. I do think that the PC version had some decent bonus content, and so that would be one reason to buy the Disney Afternoon Collection, is just to see the bonus content, not things like Boss Rush or Time Attacks, because I honestly don't think most people who would buy this game would really want to play these games too much. But yeah, bonus content won't exist for the 2 new games if the 2 new games never come to PC. I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see this getting reviewed negatively, though, as these new games are not included. Yeah, and I have this game and I think I covered it. I don't think I got any achievements in it because really none of these games are easy enough to play. These are old school NES games. You can see a rewind and a pause button, and even with rewind and pause you're still going to have a very rough thing. And particularly this Uncle Scrooge game, what is that, DuckTales game, was just remade, and it just controls a lot better to play the remade version of it. It makes a lot more sense to play the remade version of it. And they kind of come off and make it like there's a lot of speedrunners or people who are nostalgic who are playing these games, and I just don't think that's really the case. Might be a few people out there, but it's probably in the hundreds, if not dozens. Well, this is exciting news. Diablo veterans announce a dark fantasy isometric action RPG called Darkhaven for PC. This is almost certainly timed in part to be around whatever Blizzard is announcing. That being said, I still wouldn't be surprised if this Kickstarter goes through and the game doesn't get made, or the game gets made and still has a lot of Diablo 4 or Diablo 3 nonsense in it. They say it's designed for solo play, cooperative adventures, and high-stake player versus player enabled rounds, which I wouldn't be surprised if any online stuff gets dropped in development. Perhaps might show what a modern interface might look like in the Diablo game, although it may not look too different from any older Diablo game. Again, I would have liked to see a lot more of these kinds of games being made by indie developers, but it requires a whole loot drop system. It requires a whole AI system for the different types of enemies and their attacks, and just a lot more animation, a lot more programming. What's interesting there is that you're seeing someone actually jump, which that's weird. And then destructible environment is weird. I don't know how destructible the environment can be. It almost feels like it's part Minecraft in that you're just digging deeper and deeper. Yeah, there might be a combination there where instead of having specific exits and entrances to floors, you can just make your own exits and entrances. But then you would have to make it be a situation where the entire world gets really difficult the deeper you go. Otherwise, someone's just going to dig to the exact bottom. Yeah, I definitely can see some modern concepts here. It is, however, worth pointing out, though, we've seen this before, where you have a few people who maybe worked on the game claiming to be the creators of the game of Diablo 1 and 2, when very possibly there was dozens if not hundreds of people that worked on Diablo 1 and 2, and even if it really was, these are the real main artistic inputters for the creation of Diablo 1 and 2, that doesn't mean that they are still in the same mindset or will make the same thing. It might very well be capturing lightning in a bottle a second time is just impossible. It is interesting how they've moved the menu bar to the left and the map to the top right instead of the menu bar being in the middle. It's probably a smart optimization there. And then it seems like it's maybe slightly an improved version of the items and such that you could pick up in Diablo. Just all new art. It may very well be the case that it's taken just this long till 2026 that somebody could make their own game that even would feel like Diablo 1 or Diablo 2 from so many years ago. And that the democratization of game development is just now starting to really kick in as far as smaller new companies being able to make what big well-funded companies made years ago, decades ago. Although in this case they're still kickstarting it, so they're needing funding. Yeah. But interestingly, you just don't get a lot of people even trying to sell something like this, trying to promise something like this. So yeah, I find that very exciting. In contrast, you can see Diablo 4 is mixed reviewed, but there are also Path of Exile games, which is what I think most people are playing that were fans of Diablo games, although I think Path of Exile still has that seasonality aspect where your characters reset after a season. Moving on, the Famitsu sales from the 19th to the 25th have been updated. I'm just going to scroll down this. I think maybe going forward, that might be the way to do it. Like Final Fantasy VII on the Switch 2 remake integrate is new, but yeah. It's really the same narrative every time, just tons and tons of Switch sales in the top 30, but overall Switch sales I think lower than they would have been in the past. Yep. Let's see. A game called Dear Me I Was is coming to the Switch, PC, iOS, and Android on February 2nd. It's currently available on the Switch 2. I'd assume that this is some kind of visual novel mystery game. An interesting art style. The thick white outline cutout gives it all this kind of paper sketchbook feel. I wouldn't say this is the best anatomy as far as character designs. Kind of feels almost like a Thai animation style, maybe a Korean animation style. Although language-wise, it's English, then French, then Italian, German, and Spanish, Spain. I guess if we look at the outfits, food. Yeah, this might be a French game. It's hard to tell. I'll put it on the follow list and move on. A game called Do Not Play launches this summer. It's a horror adventure game. River City Saga Journey to the West has been announced for PS5, Switch, and PC. I feel like there was a River City game that was taken down just a couple days ago. Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not, or if I'm thinking of something, some other game series. Really shouldn't speculate at this point. I'm not mentally all there to be trying to recall things correctly. A Whisper of Fall Jin Yi Wei gameplay trailer and screenshots are available on Gamatsu if you want to check that out. These games, I think in particular, are going to have to start really standing out from each other. Otherwise, you're going to get a huge mess of way too similar Asian or traditional Chinese style games in particular, which we already have a ton of that from previous generations of games. But yeah, it would be very easy, I imagine, for the Western audience to just tune out anything that looks Chinese if there's too many of them and they're too similar. Let's see, 3D idle game V Project has been announced for iOS and Android. Okay, looks like anime boys. So that might sell better than you would think. I think there's probably a lot more demand in fans of anime boys than is getting satisfied. Utawa Mono, Past and Present Rediscovered, launches May 28th for the PS5 and Switch 2 in Japan and PC worldwide. This feels like this might be a re-releasing of previous games. Maybe. Or it might just be a new game. New JRPG game. Let's see. Villian Code debut trailer details and screenshots are available. Okay. Yeah, I've wanted to play more RPGs, particularly JRPGs, and it really has just been another series that I just don't know how I could really play it. Yeah. Too much time commitment in particular. Let's see, Card and Sell. Expansion passes detailed 6th free content update is now available. Oh, speaking of card games getting on update, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel had a 10 gigabyte update I had to download before I could start today's stream. That is quite a lot of data for a game I don't actually play. Let's see, we talked about concepts shutting down. It's not too much being said here. Damon and Baby launches March 25th. Is it Damon or is it Demon? I guess it's Damon. It's spelled like the name Damon, not like a server daemon. Just in case you were wondering. Let's see, Homomura Hime launches March 4th. The long-awaited bullet hell action game is detailed. Okay. Blaze Blue Entropy Effect X includes Dead Cells and Icy collaboration content. You can play as the Beheaded and Icy. I'll leave it on that. PlayStation Plus monthly lineup for February have been announced. My Hero Academia's Justice Full Roster trailer is available on Komatsu if you want to check it out. Yeah. This is another one of those pages that doesn't have a checkbox. I don't know why that happens. My code should be there. Moving on, Scott Pilgrim EX launches March 3rd. I question how relevant Scott Pilgrim is. Really. It may very well just be a series that is cheap to license and somewhat popular. A action-adventure RPG Emberville launches in early access this summer. This feels more like a Stardew Valley game, but there might be more to it. Looking at the screenshots. And pretty much I just call anything with farming a Stardew Valley game, which is probably way too generic of a way to describe things. A co-op RC adventure game, Wheels Mate, has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Yeah, I really want to just rush and be done, and I don't think even taking a break is going to help me much. Under a Rock, development progress update video and screenshots are available on Komatsu if you want to check that out. A first-person psychological mystery thriller, The Alighieri Circle, Dante's Bloodline, has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Well, that is an interesting title. I don't know what it means. Alighieri Circle, and we've only got a couple of screenshots. And seems like it's a artistic spin-off of Dante's Divine Comedy. Interesting. Or mostly Dante's Inferno, I imagine. That's what it really is focused on. A turn-based wushu RPG on the Edge has been announced for PC. And then Compile Heart and Megami Tensei Co-Creator announced Villian Code for PS5, Switch 2, PS4, and Switch. Okay, we looked at that earlier. That's going to bring us to the Gaming on Linux articles. GPT has released a statement on the confusion with the Bazelite Linux support. They say, first of all, we are just a hardware manufacturer focused on a niche market. We have no interest in getting involved in any political disputes. I'm not sure what political disputes. All we just want is to build good devices so more users can enjoy them, whether they're Windows users or Linux users. I guess maybe they're calling that a political dispute. That's always been our goal. And then here they are doubling down. Starting with the Win 4, we've been working with Bazelite back then. Antheus was the one who reached out to GPT, and the collaboration continued with the Win Max 2 as well. So when it came to the Win 5, following our usual practice, we planned to send a device to Bazelite for system adaptation and optimization. At that point, Antheus mentioned to me that Baselite was having some internal management issues. I didn't think much of it. The management problems don't really affect the system adaptation work, so we decided to continue the cooperation as usual. I also casually posted about the collaboration with Baselite on X, and then just 3 days later the Baselite announcement you saw came out. So they're blaming Baselite here. I don't believe GPD at all in this, but who knows what they really mean. Inherently, they said they claimed that they were getting an official build of Baselite, and it seems like even in the past when they were collaborating, they weren't actually getting official builds of Baselite. So they definitely overstepped the ground there. Yeah. The internal management issues noted are to do with Antheus Kapernikakis, was previously part of the Baselite team and creator of the handheld Daemon project, but ended up being kicked out due to repeated violations of the Code of Conduct. Antheus has since written up their own version of events that led to them being removed, which is a little on the spicy side. So, yeah. Seems like there's some Linux drama, which does occur, certainly on projects. There's just been this need for enforcement of code and conducts and having codes of conducts on bigger Linux projects, where in the past somebody could be a total jerk and make their own Linux project and just get away with that. But yeah, there's definitely an effort to clean up bad attitudes, the autistic level of snidiness and rudeness. I kind of blame Git and GitHub a little bit for this too, in that you have these projects that are collaborative, and then there's just really no good system and no good support for somebody to actually be collaborative. And sometimes it does feel like there just needs to be a diplomat in the room between different programmers, communicating in between as a middleman. But yeah, I've definitely had projects that are run by jerks. I've definitely seen a lot of projects that are run by people that really don't want to deal with people, and so they'll just shove their code out. And that's probably a big portion of programmers in general, is that they just want to shove their code out, and they don't want really bug reports, and they don't want feature requests, and they just don't want those kinds of things. And I don't know if GitHub in particular has a great way of saying, hey, we don't want feature requests, we don't want bug reports. It'd be weird to say we don't want bug reports, but I can see where people could say, hey, this is a side project. I don't want people asking for things that I'm not willing to add. Certainly. They're still working on like full disk encryption on SteamOS, and that has a lot of communication around it. I put at least 2 feature suggestions on 2 projects months ago, and neither one got responded to. So yeah, it is the case that these open source projects perhaps come with slightly more internal management issues than a business, where in a business there is a hierarchy, and whoever knows the boss, whoever is closest to the boss in rank, whoever is friends with the boss, is going to get their way. And if there is any internal conflict, it's going to end up with somebody getting fired from the project, perhaps quicker and more quietly, if HR, I guess, doesn't, or management in general doesn't figure a way to smooth things over. But I guess we now know more of the story. There's a new Suitably Weird Mugenics feature trailer on Gaming on Linux if you want to check that out. See, Mugenics is coming out on February 10th. You Can Stop Destroying Video Games initiative is going to get a public hearing organized by the European Parliament. It'll be interesting to see what they say. It's also interesting. So yeah, I did not go through the effort to block most of these ad content things using the Violent Monkey scripts that I enable, because AdGuard Home, when it is working, blocks all of those things anyways. And the fact that AdGuard Home is not working right now and my smart homes devices are working makes me slightly concerned that as soon as I reboot my router, it will start working. The ad blocking will start working, and then the smart home devices will stop working. Which, if that's the case, I don't know why that would be the case, but you never know. GDC report said 36% of devs use generative AI, while 28% target the Steam Deck and 8% target Linux. So, yeah, that is too high of a number. I definitely feel like Steam has had this growing problem of too many games being listed on Steam annually anyways, and they haven't had a great way to curtail that. In fact, they've encouraged it with the Steam Direct program. And I definitely think there's some tweaks that could be made to the Steam Direct program to either eliminate a bunch of old games or prevent a lot of low effort games from being released on Steam. In particular, just preventing individual developers and publishers from releasing more than one game every 3 months or 6 months would probably help a decent amount. While not really affecting most legitimate game developers. But there is a great way in which they could also say just no AI generated content at all for Steam Direct listed games, that you have to individually negotiate with Steam, and they probably won't even email you back if you're a small company if your game does have AI in it. And honestly, they don't even have to enforce that rule too much. They can just say no and scare off enough people that people stop using it, except for, of course, the likes of EA, which is going to use it no matter what. Let's see, moving on, the Proton Experimental has been updated to fix the EA app again on SteamOS and Linux. Seems like they constantly are having to fix the EA app. Probably have to fix several of the apps if I was to guess. The original Final Fantasy VII is getting a new refreshed edition. Apparently anyone who owns the 2013 edition are eligible to access the new version at no additional cost. And then both versions will remain accessible to the owner's Steam library once the new version is released. Interesting. 2013 edition is still pretty old. I wouldn't be surprised if there was just some performance things that also had to be added to it. So yeah. Do I own Final Fantasy VII right now? No. Seems like you need an EA account to own it. So, I mean, yeah, you can buy it for $5 right now, and that's, I guess, something to think about. Is it even bundled with the Final Fantasy VII Remake? So yeah, I guess there's a slight argument to maybe buying it. But yeah, maybe it's the online features just don't work anymore. It's also a possibility. Yeah, I've already spent way too much money in the past week or two. Spending another $5 is not going to bankrupt me, but it does feel like it's just doubling down on a bad hand. Hunt Down Overtime looks like it's a glorious follow-up to Hunt Down from 2021. I do not recognize a game called Hunt Down. from 2021. Though. I already looked at that. It's already on the file list. Let's see. Stardew Valley developer is clear. Makes it clear that Haunted Chocolatier is progressing well. Okay. I didn't really think I know that they were working on a new game and that they'd named it. The native Linux app for the NVIDIA GeForce Now is now in beta if you want to check that out. 4 Final Fantasy games have arrived on the Good Old Games Preservation program. Wouldn't it be funny if one of them is Final Fantasy VII? Yeah, it doesn't seem like it is. Although maybe Final Fantasy VII already is preserved. It does kind of go to show how different the visuals are between these different Final Fantasy games and how they really just don't have a big connection to each other. The deck builder meets Bullet Heaven with Hordes of Fate, a Hand of Fate adventure is arriving in Q2 of 2026. I played Hand of Fate 1 and Hand of Fate 2. By the time I was done with Hand of Fate 2, I had not finished the game, and frankly, I feel like it was just dragging on way too long and just not really a great experience. I feel like this takes out the story elements more of Hand of Fate, which I don't know if that really improves it or not. I guess I'll put it on the fall list as I yawn. So here we have Meet the Mind behind Bazite, an interview with Kyle Gospodnich. Which, yeah, is interesting. We have now a different person being interviewed right at the same time. It's a fairly simplistic question and answer interview, but you definitely don't see this very often from mainstream video game journalists anymore. Let's see. A open gaming collective has been formed to push Linux gaming even further. It pulls together the likes of Bazite and Universal Blue, which Bazite is kind of based on that, Asus Linux, Shadow Blip, Pico OS, Fyra Labs, along with Chimera OS, Nobara, Playtron. It seems like they're going to try and centralize their efforts to focus on hardware drivers and game scope that would be usable for all of those different flavors and distros of Linux. Which, yeah, let's hope that that actually goes somewhere and succeeds. Let's see, Netflix Animation Studios now funding Blender development. I talked about this earlier. So, yeah, they're just kind of supporting them, which is not uncommon for companies to support things like Blender if they're using it or not. Kind of doesn't matter. In a lot of ways, it may just be a way for a company to have a write-off as far as donating to something that's like a charity. NVIDIA Security Bulletin for January 26 reveals new GPU driver security issues. Interesting. Good Old Games is now using AI-generated images on their store. Oh, okay, well, that's a negative. As soon as there was a new person in charge of Good Old Games, you start to see AI art being used. Particularly if this is part of their like sales banner art. I mean, Steam is kind of notoriously known for paying artists and celebrating artists in their banner art sections. Going AI is really in a completely different direction from that. A comedy point-and-click adventure, Shadows of the Afterland, launches February 10th. Looks like it might be my style of game. Yeah, I already have it on the follow list. And that brings us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, which we probably won't have too much of those. Let's see. Ubisoft veteran says they were suspended for public comments on the return to office policy. The Ubisoft Montreal team has now spoken to the game developer to further outline their views on return to office mandates. Yep. Seems like more attempting to crush the people, the employees at Ubisoft. Union busting, for lack of a better term. 1 in 4 developers were laid off over the past 2 years. But weirdly, you don't see a lot of just like people on LinkedIn. Some game developers particularly were probably paid a lot so that they have 6 months or longer, maybe even a couple of years of severance and savings to not immediately try and enter the games market again. But also, there's just been constant layoffs, so even if job listings do exist on LinkedIn or some other site, even GameDeveloper.com has a job listings board. I wouldn't be surprised if they're just not getting hired as much. Let's see, 82% of US-based game developers support unionization, which, yeah, that really goes to show that, yeah, particularly for these kinds of jobs, unions seem like the better go to the employees. It is always surprising that the Communication Workers of America are effectively creating video game unions to maintain their numbers and their relevancy, whereas previously the Communication Workers of America were people working at telephone companies, which I imagine there isn't that many employees at telephone companies anymore. Let's see. There's a report that the Amazon Game Studio boss is leaving the company. Christoph Hartman is reportedly parting ways with Amazon as Amazon shifts focus to its cloud gaming service. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Meta retains optimization in VR after Reality Labs loses $83.6 billion in 6 years. Yep, they are still doubling down in VR, it seems. Let's see. Xbox hardware revenue tumbled by 32% in Q2. The downturn was attributed to wilting console sales. But yeah, there really isn't a good reason why you'd buy an Xbox. Now weirdly, I'm going to have to at some point decide what my next controller is going to be, and it's probably going to be a Steam frame controller. Or a Steam controller, what are they called? I think they're just called Steam controllers. Because if it gets to the point where Xbox isn't even making Xbox controllers, or they're too expensive, or they're just not relevant because they don't have the right buttons, then yeah, a Steam controller would be likely the next choice. Although maybe a PlayStation controller would make some sense. Although I really don't want to relearn PlayStation layouts and buttons. Games in particular would need to be more adjusted to accommodate PlayStation controllers and Steam controllers too, as Xbox controllers become less and less relevant on PC gaming. Let's see, the Women in Games CEO says ethical AI should augment human creativity. Which, yeah, you'd think that the Women in Games movement, if it was properly an actual movement to empower human women to be in game development, would not be promoting the use of AI, which is almost certainly going to reduce the number of women in games. But unfortunately, a lot of these organizations are either ineffective or straight up not designed to actually do what they claim they're trying to do. But, yeah. I don't know if there really is a gender break there as far as AI goes, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a more male perspective that comes about from AI, since there probably is just a lot more male-made content on the internet. Yeah, from that, maybe that would affect males more when you use AI as far as losing their jobs, but probably not by much. Then we have, quote, "We're shutting it down. Ubisoft unions call for an international strike. 5 unions in Froze have proposed a massive walkout in February in response to a widespread cost-cutting and return to office mandate." I believe there was also some kind of strike or something that either happened yesterday, today, or over the weekend in the United States, but the idea of this strike being promoted or talked about or just coordinated correctly seems to always not really happen. So I have never seen a general strike actually work in the United States. Too many people are at will employees when get fired, and too many people are frankly just not going to be on board. Anyways, alright, so I'm going to take a brief break, and then we'll come back and try and wrap up. Be right back. Sorry for coughing again. Yeah. So I'm back now. We'll go through all the new games on Steam. I'm thinking what we'll do is probably be mostly Silent here. Yeah, I'm increasingly just not feeling great. So seems like that keeps happening. This looks like something very much inspired by Resident Evil, which, yeah. I guess the question is, how small can you make a Resident Evil inspired game before it's too small? But yeah, this definitely feels very inspired by Resident Evil 2, in this room in particular. But then it seems like it goes in some different directions too. Anyways, when I swipe like this, that means I'm leaving the tabs open. When I put it on the follow list, it means I'm actually interested in on it. And when I swipe down, that means I'm closing the tabs. And I think for the most part, my desire here is to go pretty silent here. I kind of wish I could do this every time. I don't think it really helps much. I'm definitely not contributing as much if I'm not actually saying anything. If I am swiping this way, I'm leaving it open to make a YouTube short on it, which I haven't actually made any YouTube shorts in a long time. I suppose if I felt kind of sick but kind of up for it, I could see maybe trying to get that process going more, or even take a middle step just to make a bunch of YouTube shorts. I saw somebody put up a YouTube short of a video and basically a brand new channel, and within an hour or two they had like 500 views. But yeah, those YouTube shorts, those vertical views are different, but they are bigger numbers, certainly. And it definitely seems also like a brand new channel may be given a lot more of a chance than an established channel. Of course, it's not going to get you enough watch time or enough views to actually be monetized if that's your goal to start a new channel. Yeah, I haven't seen anybody be able to make a new channel that actually directs people back to their main channel very much at all. If anything, it's usually the secondary channel is directing people away from your main channel. This is that game Twilight Moonflower with the credits, I believe. Just looking at it, it's not that interesting. This clearly is an adult game. It's either been censored to not be in the adult section or is just being mislabeled intentionally. This one doesn't support English. That doesn't look like anything. Here we have a actually properly tagged adult game, which I'll look at later. We are seeing less of those, it feels like, these days. Low in fairness. Usually, a lot of those properly tagged adult games should also be in the adult section. Yeah. Desperately should find a new audio source and stop just playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel in the background. It's my only audio source. Although it kind of works also when I take a break. There are thoughts there, thoughts that have not formed into complete thoughts, thoughts that haven't formed into plans. What I really need to do over this weekend is just find a way to sleep. I wish I had a magic little pill that could take and let me sleep and stay asleep for 24 hours or so. Something enough that maybe that would heal my sickness more. But yeah, that doesn't really exist, and if such pills do exist, they're not available to me and probably highly addictive. As an interesting thing about Star Trek, the Next Generation, and Star Trek in general, is that they didn't find any way to have the humans have to sleep less. There still were beds and bedrooms and things like that. Although most of the rooms shown in Star Trek, as far as the quarters, did tend to only have a bed and maybe some art in it and not too much else. Maybe a desk. Which is an interesting thing. I think it was Data's room, his quarters in particular, that had a desk that I'm thinking of, and even for Data it seems kind of weird that you're living on a ship and yet you have a separate desk in your quarters. And you would think if it's closer to a submarine analogy, the quarters would just be for sleeping and all the working would be separated. So yeah, no good work-life balance apparently for Data. I'm still very much hoping to one day be excited by some of these announcements, but I have to admit that usually I have yet to be excited, I think even once, but by looking at all the new games that come out on Steam, because anything that is slightly exciting, although this might catch my attention, I bet it doesn't support English. Nope, it doesn't. Anything that's slightly exciting puts out a press release, and because it puts out a press release, I hear about them earlier in the streams. Yeah, this might be something, although this also screams AI art. Let's see. Yeah. So it's like a defense game with AI art in it. So I'm gonna say no to it for the AI use. Here's Code Vein 2. It's already mixed reviewed. That's a shame. Let's see if there's great reason for it. It's not a good successor to the first game. And then Code Vein 2 is fun but feels like a step back from Code Vein 1. No online co-op, but they have the audacity to charge me $70. He should have just made a new IP instead of using the Code Vein IP to make a game that's not only doesn't continue the story, but totally loses the spirit of the original, the edgelord 90s goth vampire cheese that made Code Vein a cult hit. After 40 minutes of cringe dialogue about friendship and saving the world, I'm done for now. So it seems like the story and tone is inconsistent with what people wanted. Interesting. I'll leave that on the fault list just to see if the opinions evolve on that. Looks like we've got a horror game of sorts. Ooh, I saw a thumbnail, I didn't actually click on the video, of somebody who played like 2 hours of like 100 games on Steam, and boy did that, just as a premise, irritate me as a concept, because that really just is delving deep into the wrong way to enjoy video games, in my opinion. That you're actively saying, I'm only going to put 2 hours into this game, so I probably can refund it after the fact. Although, in fairness, if you tried that, if you played 100 games and played them for an hour and then asked for the no questions asked refund, you would probably get stopped after the 4th or 5th refund, I suspect. Maybe even after the 2nd or 3rd. I don't think the system is just going to let you manipulate it that way. But yeah, even if Steam does let you manipulate it that way, that is just not the right way to play games. And that is very much the mainstream video game journalist way in which a lot of games were played. Is that they put a couple hours into it and then tried to convince people, or at least conveniently didn't mention that they only played 2 hours of the game while putting out a review of the game, which you definitely cannot review a full game in 2 hours for most games. There's a few that you can beat in 2 hours and see all of the content, and actually it's intended to be played that way. And there's a few more that you could speedrun and beat in 2 hours, but that wouldn't be the intended way in which most people would play the game. But yeah, at a certain point it just doesn't feel like it really makes sense to. This is rated very positively, so I'm going to put it on the wish list. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to have reviews for review's sake if the reviews you're making are inaccurate, dishonest, or rushed. And yet, most of mainstream video game sites just actively try to have that experience happen. Yeah, even in the day of like Nintendo Power and magazines, though, it tended to be the case that they picked and chose what games they were going to cover and spent potentially a month covering them. Now, embracing every single game on Steam as the new norm, it would be crazy to try to cover even a significant percentage of all these games that come out. And just unnecessary. I mean, you can really judge a book by the cover quite a bit for most of these games. While I was taking a break there, I laid down for a second and I honestly thought there was a small possibility that I was just going to fall asleep. Which, yeah, if I just left Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel streaming for hours and hours, might be something weird that happens there as far as watch time and views. But probably not. That's a different looking model. Don't see that too often, just a withered old or sickly woman. Maybe not old. Here's a great example of dark screenshot syndrome, just everything in silhouette. Hmm. Come on. I'm just getting hit with wave after wave of exhaustedness. Hmm. Hmm. Is this support English? Nope. Alice card episodes. It's probably nothing. Yeah, we've got another adult game. We've had like 3 or 4 today. More than we normally see. I got a emergency protein bar that I wanted to taste, and they're like 400 calories each, and the entire package is like 3,900 calories, so it would be roughly two days on a 2,000 calorie diet, a little less than that for one person if you ate them. Tastes fine, but doesn't taste great, and has a 5-year shelf life, which maybe is slightly better than most things. I honestly think that there might be legal reasons why nothing can claim past 5 years of shelf life, or they can claim longer shelf lives as long as you don't open the outer packaging. As soon as you open it, it's really just a year of shelf life. This is as much as they're willing to claim. Yeah, I imagine it's a very expensive emergency thing, which at a certain point you probably would just prefer a few more cans of soup for a lot less. Which that is basically the same sentiment I found for some protein, not really for emergencies, but protein cinnamon rolls that are pretty heavy. They taste alright, but they don't taste great. And again, I imagine you're paying like $4 or $5 for a single cinnamon roll when you could literally have cinnamon rolls for $1. Yeah, wanted to try them out and just see what they tasted like, and it has very much been my experience that the flavor of most of this food that's emergency food is bad. It's mediocre at best. Sometimes it's alright, sometimes it's downright awful. And yeah, if you are going to truly have emergency rations, a proper military, US military MRE might very well be much better for what you're looking for, because the MREs have iron filing packs in them that heat up when you add water. They're full meals designed for military soldiers, so perhaps more calories than you normally would eat for a civilian just trying to survive, but that's not really too big of an issue. Yeah. I think I'm going to increasingly just buy more cans of soup, more food that can just be cycled in and out, food that I like to eat on a day-to-day basis, and also it wouldn't potentially break the budget. Plus this most recent snowstorm, just like another example where I didn't really have to delve deeply into that emergency content, not content, food stuffs anyways. Does this support English? It says it does. I kind of don't believe it though. And yeah, if anything, what I needed more of was just standard food. And yeah, being snowed in for an entire week, it's almost certainly going to leave any refrigerator somewhat threadbare after a week goes. Run for the money game. I don't think it's going to be anything, but it's interesting it's coming to the West. I think this is probably an adult game. It's not been properly labeled. Wouldn't be surprised if this is an adult game that's not properly labeled. One of these days, I should plug in some of the Blu-ray players I have sitting around and like watch some of my DVDs and Blu-rays instead of just watching streaming stuff. That could potentially work on my favorite. There's another game that doesn't have a checkbox next to it. Yeah. There's a Plants vs. Zombies clone. Cleaning simulator. Why would you just simulate cleaning? I don't know, but there's already several games like that where you're effectively just simulating cleaning. Yeah, and again, it's pretty much every stream I say this. I am just not in any real shape to do any faultless cleanup, so let's not even bother with that. That's going to bring us to the end of the show. I have been able this week to keep these streams somewhat small and short simply by just not being energetic, and also in part by there not being a ton of video game news. Wouldn't be surprised if somewhere around February 15th or so we start to get more video game news to talk about. Anyways, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment,